I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
There were 9 mistakes made ahead of me, and I will make sure over the next decade or so that uh, they will know that they made a mistake.
Welcome to episode 43. We're going to do a fully football episode, right? I don't think we're going to go into any other sports. So, I mean, waking up this morning, the only thing I saw out of the football news was either the DeAndre Hopkins contract extension or the fact that Odell Beckham likes being doogied on. But I don't think we're I don't think we're going to go too much into that. But DeAndre Hopkins getting an extension for the Arizona Cardinals, 2-year extension. So he's going to be in Arizona for the next 5 years. So becoming kind of the heir apparent to Larry Fitzgerald once he finally calls it a quits. So 2-year extension worth $54.5 million. So that makes him, I think, the highest paid non-quarterback player in the NFL right now. So as a Cardinals fan, what is your thoughts on this extension?
Yeah, so first off, I think it was slapped on to his previous contract, so he's going to be signed for 5 years. So, I mean, it's a really good deal for the Cardinals in terms of locking up their new franchise wide receiver, but I think it's also kind of a sneaky good deal in terms of the money, just because obviously they're paying him a really high amount. But if you really look at their roster right now, they already have aging veterans on the roster who are kind of already being accounted for in the just salary cap, or they kind of have young players that are unproven who don't really seem to be getting a payday as of recently. I know that Buda Baker paid and for a contract extension pretty soon. But besides that, I mean, they don't really have any guys looking for a contract just yet. So they definitely have the room to sign him. Larry Fitzgerald's going to be off the books pretty soon. So the deal definitely makes sense to me.
I think with this deal, they need it because he's obviously a top 5, top 10 wide receiver in football. So I think if you're keep him on your team, pair him up with Kyler Murray, it's going to be very beneficial for Kyler Murray's for the future. And then he can also just work with someone like Christian Kirk who can become that number 2 guy. But yeah, what they don't really have a lot of, like you said, a lot of contracts to be worked on right now. So by getting Hopkins for the foreseeable future, they're able to kind of maybe sign some veterans to smaller, shorter deals, kind of put that in that playoff window, that even that Super Bowl window, where they can potentially win 1 or 2 Super Bowls. I mean, maybe not 1 or 2 Super Bowls, but some playoff games, become a powerhouse in the NFL. I know they do play in a very tough division, but by getting some veteran leadership, they can kind of catapult them to a higher level in the NFL.
Yeah, certainly. That's certainly the hope with the signing. I mean, Steve Keim, after the Josh Rosen kind of debacle and the horrible hiring of Steve Wilkes, I think the front office, or more specifically the owners, kind of said, all right, this is your last chance. This is your last offseason to get it right. And if you don't get it right, you're going to be fired. So he went out, he hired Cliff Kingsbury, which was a really bold move, replaced his first round quarterback from the year before, which is even a bolder move, and got Kyler Murray with the first overall pick. And I mean, this offseason, we see again, they're signing a lot of players. They're getting one of the best players in college football last year in the NFL draft. And then, of course, they're trading for DeAndre Hopkins and signing him to this huge extension. So I'd like to see their GM and their front office really trying to go all in. But just before I kind of talk about that a little more, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when NFL players are signed to 2-year, 3-year, 4-year contracts, and then they kind of start holding out in a sense just because they want a new contract. I think in that situation, the NFL teams have the leverage, but I guess it was good because it wasn't a restructuring of his current contract. Rather, it was just kind of an extension added on to this contract. So I believe with the contract, he'll have a pretty decent salary in terms of kind of salary friendly for the Arizona Cardinals. I believe making around $14 million a year for the next 2 or 3 years, unless they spread out the money, and then he's going to get near $30 million a year, which is absolutely insane. But hopefully that kind of coincides with their window to be a really good team.
Yeah, I think it just all depends on because I do think, yeah, like you said, I think he's getting paid around. It says annual average salary of $18.8 million. So he is getting paid a decent amount. I mean, but that's not really compared to other players, like Julio Jones, I think, and Michael Thomas are right behind him, so they're not completely getting underpaid or anything. But I just think that the Cardinals are trying to set up to save him, have him on his team for the foreseeable future, and get that connection with Kyle Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, so they can become like one of those great duos in the NFL right now. Because I think, yeah, like you said, the owner and the GM are kind of a lot bit on thin ice, so they need to start winning, and that's why they're kind of going with a new wave with the hiring of Kingsbury, kind of taking not I don't want to really say a shot in the dark, but taking kind of a dark horse in Kyle Murray as their quarterback to kind of just start to win now. Because I mean, there hasn't been a lot of success for the last couple of years in Arizona.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, we've seen with a lot of young quarterbacks, a really good wide receiver and or a really good running back really just helps them out so much and really helps their growth and development. I mean, we saw with a guy like Jared Goff his rookie year, even Carson Wentz, they really didn't have that go-to weapon, or Jared Goff did have Todd Gurley to kind of lean upon, but their offense didn't really utilize him in the passing game. But then, I mean, you look at a guy that same year with Dak Prescott, they really used Ezekiel Elliott as kind of a decoy to take the pressure off of Dak, and it really helped his development, in my opinion. So if they can kind of do that for not only Kyler Murray, but these really young wide receivers they just drafted last year. They drafted a lot of wide receivers last year. They drafted Andy Isabella. They drafted Keyshawn Johnson. They drafted a couple other guys in here. They really hope to step up. They drafted Christian Kirk 2 years ago. So not only could DeAndre Hopkins take the pressure off of Kyler Murray, but he can also take the pressure kind of having more favorable single teams, weaker cornerbacks on the depth chart of opposing teams for some of these young wide receivers, which I think is going to be really important for this team as well.
Yeah, I think having Hopkins and Larry Fitzgerald at the top of your wide receiver depth chart, that's going to help these young wide receivers, Andy and Isabella, Christian Kirk, like you said. That's going to really groom them and become stars in today's NFL game. I know Andy Isabella is very undersized and kind of his ceiling isn't as high as someone like Christian Kirk, but he could become kind of like a sneaky Wes Welker like type player where he could become a great target for Kyle Murray. Because if they are doing like a sort of a air raid West Coast style offense where they do like those kind of those shorter routes where Andy Isabella can excel there. So having these two wide receivers locked up for a couple of years will really help these young guys.
Yeah, certainly. And just to add on to Andy Isabella a little bit, I know he had a really disappointing rookie year, but ended up really working in the offseason. He changed his number, which I know that seems like such a stupid minor thing, but for a lot of guys, that's kind of a new identity and kind of a new attitude. So switching from number 89 to number 17, I know he likes those kind of further down on the kind of number list numbers for Andy Isabella. I know he wore, I think, number 9 or something in college. But, I mean, there's high expectations for them. It was basically Josh Rosen for Andy Isabella, essentially, because they traded Rosen for the second overall pick in the draft. So if you really want to do the math, I mean, that's a 10th pick in the draft, and that's a couple other picks because they traded up for Rosen. For Andy Isabella, a guy they drafted before DK Metcalf even went off the board. So, I mean, high expectations for Andy Isabella, and I think he's going to play a lot this season. I think he's going to play on the outside, matter of fact, this season. Let's see if he can kind of win on the outside versus NFL caliber cornerbacks.
Before we get into another contract extension, you just brought up Josh Rosen. What are your thoughts on Josh Rosen being signed by the Buccaneers right after we kind of talked about how he was on the trade block and potentially getting cut by the Dolphins just last episode?
I mean, that's an absolutely ideal situation. I remember right when I saw Josh Rosen got cut, I kind of thought to myself, the only way he ends up being a starter again in the NFL is the Tom Brady route. And that's kind of funny that he ended up being signed by Tom Brady's team. Imagine that Tom Brady gets hurt and then Josh Rosen ends up being Tom Brady. I know that would probably never happen, but that would be kind of a weird paradox of things to happen. But again, I mean, if Josh Rosen could kind of swallow his pride, swallow his ego, I know he's a really smart UCLA kid. He knows how great Tom Brady is. If he can really soak in that offense, not only that, but soak in the coach he ended up missing out on in Arizona in Bruce Arians, if he can kind of soak up his mind, because he's been a quarterback whisperer. I mean, he could probably train Josh Rosen even better than Tom Brady can, because at this point in his career, it's not like Tom Brady's Ryan Fitzpatrick where he's trying to groom the next quarterback and is willing to do so. I think he'll definitely teach him some things, but I think he'll soak up more information from a guy like Bruce Arians, who, me and you said it before the draft in 2018, he has a very similar kind of play style and just mechanic arsenal as Peyton Manning. And Bruce Arians certainly has a lot of experience with guys like Peyton Manning, guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck. So if you can kind of soak up some of that knowledge, then I wouldn't be surprised to see Josh Rosen securing a starting job, potentially even in Tampa Bay in a couple of years.
Yeah, like last episode, that's what I said. I said someone like the Steelers who need a quarterback in their quarterback room, kind of be the backup and then potentially the starter after Ben Roethlisberger is gone. But I mean, this is pretty similar situation to what I kind of panned out. But yeah, learning from Tom Brady, learning from Bruce Arians, who, like you said, also like Carson Palmer with your Arizona Cardinals, he resurrected him after kind of his very low point of his career when he was on the Raiders for probably, I think, 1 or 2 years. But yeah, this is going to be very helpful for Josh Rosen. I think he's a very good quarterback, and he's a similar play style to Peyton Manning, even like Tom Brady, who's not the most mobile quarterback in the pocket, but kind of has that football smarts that made him so great. So I think this is going to be really beneficial for Josh Rosen. Once Brady retires, maybe we'll see Josh Rosen in the starting lineup as the Bucs quarterback in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, certainly. And I want to stop comparing him to Peyton Manning so much because, I mean, he's never going to be Peyton Manning, and he wasn't nearly as good as Peyton Manning coming out. I don't even think Josh Rosen's ever going to get to that point of being kind of a top 5 elite quarterback, top 10 quarterback. He just hopes to be a starter, a fringe starter. I mean, that's really what he's shooting for at this point, to be a top 30 quarterback. But just a point I want to make, I mean, imagine if the Colts organization gave up on Peyton Manning his first year, because obviously he didn't have a great first year. They won 2 games, and he set the interception record. I know the team around him was really ugly, but I mean, imagine, again, the Colts give up on Peyton Manning, and he kind of goes from team to team and never really finds his groove in the NFL. Well, that's exactly what happened to Josh Rosen. He was really given an unfair shot his first year, released by the Cardinals, essentially. I mean, obviously, again, they trade him away and then not given him a fair shot again. Same thing happens to him again. Another rookie quarterback gets drafted over him. So maybe all he needs is a shot, and he would end up being a good starting caliber NFL quarterback. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely needs to work his tail off with Brady and Arians while they're both in Tampa Bay because they're getting older. So who knows what their timeline is? But he needs to, yeah, like you said, put his pride away and just put his head down, work his tail off. But moving on to our next contract extension, we had from the Cleveland Browns, we had Kareem Hunt, 2-year, $13 million extension. So he had 1 year left on his deal, and they'll have him for 3 more years. So I really like this signing. I like the Browns with their running game. I know Baker got lit up last year because he had a really sustainable offensive line, but they really addressed that problem in the offseason and in the draft, getting Jack Conklin from the Titans, getting Jedrick Wills from the Alabama. So having kind of a 2-headed monster with Kareem Hunt and also Nick Chubb, it's going to be really helpful for taking kind of the load off Baker and having him perform better than he did last year.
Yeah, and this is you brought up all the great points about how great of a signing this was for the Browns, but I just kind of want to look at Kareem Hunt for a second, and this is such an interesting signing to me because at first I looked at the money and was like, Kareem Hunt signed for that to be kind of a situational role running back behind a guy in Nick Chubb who is really good and quite honestly probably better than Kareem Hunt. I thought it was really surprising, and I was kind of thinking to myself, why wouldn't he bet on himself? But thinking about it more and more, not only is he not going to have the statistical season this year, in my opinion, to kind of justify a big contract, but I think him and his agent really smartly looked at where the running back position is going and said, this is the best opportunity we're going to have at money. This kind of 2-year extension, going to be with an organization he seems he likes, with a role he likes, obviously, if he signs this extension. So I just thought it was really interesting. And I think this is going to be kind of a contract point for a lot of NFL teams when their running backs try to get paid and say, well, look at Kareem Hunt. He just took this really small year for multiple years to be a part of this team and really help the team out. sign some other players. So I think this signing is bad news for running backs in terms of getting money, and really just a good move for NFL teams in general and just roster building in general.
Yeah, I mean, Brady going to Tom Brady, he's been doing this for years in New England, taking contract cuts. So maybe, I mean, I don't want to compare Kareem Hunt to Tom Brady. Obviously, that's pretty bad thing to say. But maybe Kareem Hunt sees how this team has really been playing during the offseason and really kind of growing as a unit. So he can see that, hey, this team has a chance to make the playoffs and make some noise in the playoffs for that matter. So maybe if he's like, I can take a cut and be here when they're in their winning years, which is, I mean, could be the case for in this situation. But I mean,
Yeah,
people are forgetting how good Kareem Hunt is. I know
yeah,
when he was in Kansas City, he was a very good running back, but off the field, that's what caused him. That's what caused him to be a Cleveland Brown at this point right now. But I do think this is very good for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, Nick Chubb, I think, is arguably a top 7 running back in the NFL now. He's very good, but Nick Chubb is very good, but he does get injured
yeah.
a lot. I mean, he has that knee problem from Georgia, couple concussions. So having kind of Kareem Hunt being your ace in your pocket when Nick Chubb goes down, or if he ever goes down, I mean, it's very good for them right now.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, I know that Kareem Hunt is really good in the receiving game too, which is a really good aspect. I know he's not really that kind of scat back that could line up at slot, line up right besides the quarterback and kind of run really sharp routes like that, but he's certainly a really good receiving threat. And I really just off the top of my head, I can't think of a better running back room than the Cleveland Browns, and that's going to be huge with Kevin Stefanski coming from the Vikings. I know we talked about this extensively over the offseason and how much they're going to rely on the running game and the play action pass game. And I mean, this is another situation where the Browns look really, really good on paper. And it's just going to be a matter of how are they going to deploy all of these really, really great weapons they have and how are they going to click. And I think at the end of the day, Nick Chubb's going to be really good. Kareem Hunt's going to be really good. This offensive line is going to be good enough. And I think it just really revolves around Baker Mayfield. And I think this is just going to be a huge season for not only him, but most, if not all, of the year 3 quarterbacks in the NFL.
So I'll ask you this question in this moment right now. Do you think the Cleveland Browns are a playoff team?
That's really tough. I mean, no, I don't, just because I do think the Steelers are better than them, and I do think that the Ravens are better than them. I don't think that's too much of an argument there, but when you're the third best team in your division, we've seen playoff teams be the third best team in their division many times in NFL history. It's just really tough when you can't really get that edge up on your division and you can't win divisional games consistently because I just think the Steelers, their offense is going to be, even if it's around league average to slightly below league average, I truly think they have a top 5 defense that's really going to carry this team. And I do think the Browns have some hidden holes that no one's talking about. I think they have a really soft front seven besides Myles Garrett. I don't think they have the best linebacking core in the NFL, certainly. And I think their secondary is just very young and inexperienced. And we see a lot of growing pains coming out of first year, second year. Ward, who I absolutely love. I think you love him too. But he's going to be guarding number ones week in and week out. Then you're going to have Greedy Williams, who really struggled last season, guarding the second best guy on the field at all times in terms of the wide receiver position. So I just think that defense is very volatile. And unless this is a top 10 week in and week out offense, which I don't trust quite yet, then I just don't see this team as a playoff team, to be honest with you.
Well, looking at the wild card, the teams that I would consider a wild card, you have the Steelers, Colts or Titans. I think
Yeah.
those two will battle for the division. The Patriots, and maybe the Broncos. And I would also put the Browns in that conversation. I mean, this
Yeah,
year,
I would too.
if I'm not mistaken. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you?
No, I was just agreeing with you. I would certainly put the Browns in the conversation.
And this year, if I'm not mistaken, aren't they doing 14 playoff teams? So that opens up
Yep.
another wild card team. So maybe
Yes.
I think they are going to be in the argument. They could potentially be in like that week 17 where they need to a bunch of scenarios to play out and they need to win for them to make the playoffs. But I do think the Browns are going to be good this year. They aren't like the hype team that they were last year. I think that's going to be really beneficial for them with not having the pressure to perform well because they had so many primetime games last year. Everybody was going to say Baker was going to be the next best quarterback in the NFL. So I think having kind of less pressure on them this season is gonna help the Browns, and I think they're gonna go kind of 8-8, 9-7
Yeah.
in that range of wins and playoff scenarios.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Baker's rookie season, they won, what, 8 games, which is really incredible when you think about it. So if they can even replicate kind of a shaky season with that, then they could certainly be a playoff team. I simply, at this point in the season, before week one, I trust the Texans more. One of those teams are going to win the division, and they're not going to compete with the Browns in terms of a wild card spot. But out of that division, you have two other teams competing as well. And then again, I just trust the Steelers more. I think it's going to come down to week 16, week 17. And I do really just believe in the Steelers and that really good defense being able to squeeze out a really tough win.
Yeah, I mean the Steelers they're built to make the playoff run because running game defense. I mean Mike Tomlin even said I don't know if it was Mike Tomlin actually. Excuse me for saying that, but a reporter said that the defense was beating the offense in Pittsburgh at every practice. So that just shows how good this defense really is. But segueing into our next section of today's episode, we're going to dive into the opening night of the NFL on Thursday night. Texans versus the reigning Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are favored at -9. So, I mean, that's a pretty big spread. We talked about it before the episode started, but is there any chance that the Texans take this game away from the Chiefs?
Now, for my kind of prediction, I do think that the Chiefs are going to win this game, but if I really had to bet on this game, I would bet for the Texans to kind of hit that under just because I really strongly believe that this is going to end up being kind of a struggle at first in a sense, but I think certainly they're going to turn it on and come third and fourth quarter, I think both Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes are going to end up lighting it up. I mean, the Texans really are going to have a chip on their shoulder. They were up, what, 24 points to the Chiefs just a couple months ago in the divisional game. They're running away with it. They felt like the better team. They were playing like the better team. And then the Chiefs simply just kicked their ass, to put it into a lack of a better term. And I really do think Deshaun Watson, with this new contract extension, is going to be really, really just hungry for a victory in week one in the opening night. I think everybody has counted out the Texans ever since the DeAndre Hopkins trade. But if you really, really look at the Houston Texans roster, they have some really great just receiving threats. Not only do they have Duke Johnson out of the backfield, but David Johnson, he could still receive the ball out of the backfield. They have Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, Kiki Kutu. I mean, that's a really good receiving core. And I've actually heard a lot of rumbles that the Texans are more confident with their receiving core than they were last year with DeAndre Hopkins. And I don't think that's too outlandish. Now, I do think they don't have that number one receiver, which is very valuable because it really takes the pressure off of all the other receivers to the point where, I mean, if one guy's locked up, he's fine. If two guys are locked up, he's fine just because they have that many weapons on this offense.
Yeah, I mean, one guy he did steal a lot of the light from all the other wide receivers, but if these wide receivers are able to perform just a great unit, I mean, you look at someone like I'll pull up the Broncos from like Peyton Manning era. They had such a great wide receiving core that
Yeah.
kind of Eric Decker, Demaryius Thomas, Wes Welker. No one was really a star, but they just played really great together. And I mean, comparing Peyton to Deshaun Watson, they're very smart football players. They have all the talent in the world. So just I think that's going to be really beneficial for Deshaun Watson and his wide receiver core because he's going to want to spread the ball all around. He's not going to really look at DeAndre Hopkins the whole play. Like
Yeah.
I'll bring up another example. Like this, Matthew Stafford said the best thing that happened to it in his career was Calvin Johnson retiring. So if Deshaun Watson's able to kind of look all over the field, make different reads, and he is such an exceptional talent, he could definitely win an MVP at some point in his career. So I do think it's going to be a close game. I mean, like you said, the Texans have a chip on their shoulder with the meltdown in the playoff game, and also inside the Chiefs ring, they have kind of the score of the game, kind of
Yeah.
throwing a little shade at them. So I think it's going to be a close game coming down the wire in the fourth quarter. But I think the Chiefs keeping the same roster for them all of last year. I think they're going to come away with this one, and I think it's going to be a very high-scoring, fun offensive game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really excited to see these two teams, just really these two offenses, because I think there's enough consistency on the defensive side of both teams to the point where we kind of know what they're going to be defensively. Maybe the Chiefs kind of start out slow like they did last season and then really pick it up in terms of their defense. They played really well on that side at the end of the season. They didn't before that point. But I mean, for the Texans, they're going to have a really solid defense that plays as a unit. They don't have one guy that really stands out and is like, oh my God, he's a superstar. But again, they just have a really good unit. And Bill O'Brien, really just give him shit all you want, but he usually has defenses that perform well. And I know he's more of an offensive guru, so that doesn't have too much to do with him. But again, I'm confident in this Texans defense to get at least a couple of stops to the point where it will be a close game, like we're kind of saying. And again, I'm just really excited to see this Houston Texans offense with these new weapons and Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the Chiefs.
Yeah, that's one player I'm definitely excited to watch, the connection between Patty Mahomes and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because just watching the connection of him and Joe Burrow in college was super fun. Just go looking at that LSU Alabama game. I mean, he took over that game, so I hope that's a net connection like that with Mahomes, who is more athletic than Joe Burrow is. It can be even more fun and even more electric than in college.
Yeah, certainly. And this is kind of a bold prediction, but I have a weird, odd feeling that Deshaun Watson's actually going to outplay Patrick Mahomes in this game. We saw Patrick Mahomes struggle a little bit and was a little bit exposed. I don't know if I want to say exposed, but he certainly did struggle in the Super Bowl. And I think Deshaun Watson, that kind of meltdown, I think it was more so of play calling and kind of playing not to lose and kind of playing a little nervous than it was Deshaun Watson really choking away that game. So I think, again, Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes got a huge contract extension this offseason. No one's talking about Mahomes, or no one's talking about Watson. Everyone's talking about Mahomes. So I certainly think these guys are very friendly with each other, but I think there's just a little bit of kind of blood boiling on the side of the Texans.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, do you think that even if they win or lose this game, do you think Deshaun Watson could come away with the MVP this year if he performs really well?
This is going to be a key indicator whether he does or not. Because if he goes out here like rookie Deshaun Watson against the Patriots, just puts up an absolute fight and ends up losing the game, I mean, that's going to edge him in the top five running for MVP, even though he lost the game. I mean, that's how good he played rookie year against the Patriots, if you remember that. And that's how good I really expect him to play in this game, quite honestly. And I do believe if he outperforms Patrick Mahomes in this game, he certainly could make a run at the MVP. And I think really early MVP odds right now, I think my top three guys, just off the top of my head, are Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, and actually Carson Wentz, a guy that you know I love.
Yeah, if I was a betting man, I have a feeling that Deshaun Watson is going to be kind of close to the top for MVP. I think he could put it together to win it this year. I do think I like Carson Wentz a lot. I like Patty Mahomes. Obviously, Patty Mahomes is always going to be a favorite, and I wonder if Lamar is going to kind of come back to the level he was last year with his MVP winning season.
Yes, certainly. And kind of the narrative of MVP is you need to win a lot of games and you need to be arguably the best team in football and be the best player on that team. But I think this is a little bit similar to a Russell Westbrook esque storyline where your star player leaves you. Still a good team, but there's not much expectations in terms of playoff success surrounding them. And if he can even will them to 11 wins or so, I think that would be enough on top of great play to win the MVP.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see this year is what we've been seeing in Seattle with Russell Wilson. I think Deshaun Watson is going to kind of play like that style of
Yeah.
play where he has to just, if he doesn't play well, the Texans just crumble. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
if Russell Wilson doesn't play well, the Seattle Seahawks crumble.
Yeah, certainly. And I know the Seahawks, kind of getting into them real quick, certainly put a better roster around Russell Wilson. I know the Seahawks are kind of an early favorite. Maybe not favorite, but I know they're kind of top three in the NFC to kind of come out of that race to be the host for the Super Bowl.
But thank everybody for listening to this episode. Previewing our next episode, we're going to go into every NFL game with our former guest, Wino Sports. Hope you guys can check that one out, but we'll see you soon.